Gospel 1590 KPRT.
The facts are indisputable. Black is beautiful. Brand new day. Back to business as usual. See, we built empires and engineers and scientists. Gave a glimpse into the past through Egyptian hieroglyphs. Black is beautiful.
This is The Real Deal with Emiel, brought to you by MHG, your local year-round trusted insurance partner. Let MHG help you for free. What's going on, Kansas City? You are listening to The Real Deal with Emiel, and I am your host, Emiel Cleaver. This show is brought to you by Phillips West Public Relations and Communications and sponsored by MHG, your trusted insurance partner. MHG has an open enrollment center located on the corner of 18th and Vine. And if you have any insurance needs or questions, you can give them a call at 816-399-4040. Now, today, I wanted to talk about the recent incidents down in Columbia, Missouri at Missouri University. And I have a guest today. My guest is former Fox 4 news reporter Steve Shaw and current Oklahoma news reporter Steve Shaw. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Emiel.
I'm glad you can join us calling in from Oklahoma. So I want to get right into it. I know you've heard, as well as everyone in the country, about what's going on at MU. You grew up in Columbia. Were you surprised by any of the things that recently happened with the student protest and the basketball team or the football team getting involved?
You know, Emiel, believe it or not, I actually went home for homecoming, which was the first weekend of October. Actually, the homecoming parade, you know, I didn't go to the parade, but we heard about what happened at the parade. I didn't know. I knew that there had been some incidents reported this past fall of some bad stuff being directed at some African American students, but I didn't know about the concerned student 1950 movement until after I'd gotten back here to Oklahoma, and I saw that the guys on the football team stood up and said, I'm not playing until something's done, that one of those being the university president resigns. To me, that told me that he probably was going to resign. So anyway, and it struck a nerve in me because, listen, I grew up in Columbia, okay? My dad was superintendent of the public schools in the 1960s and 1970s, and he was really in charge of a lot of the desegregation that went on in the schools back then, and it was a tough deal. But Tim Wolf, when I saw Tim Wolf is like a favorite son in Columbia, and I think Tim was a quarterback. He's the president who announced his resignation.
Right.
He, back in the day, in 1975, Tim was the quarterback of Rockbridge's state championship football team. I mean, he was the leader of that team, and that team included a lot of guys of color. I mean, one of the best players was Sam Smith. He was a running back. He went on to play for Kansas, and he played for the Miami Dolphins. And if you ask Sam Smith today what he thought about Tim Wolf, I think he would say he was a good guy.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, I think there's a lot of dynamics. You know, if President Wolf, if he is guilty of anything, and I'm not saying he is guilty of anything, but maybe he was guilty of maybe not moving fast enough. I think that was the number one thing that angered folks in Columbia. So, you know what? Whatever happened, but it sounds to me like they're really circling the wagons, and it seems to me, you know, from afar here in Oklahoma City, it seems like they're trying to do the right thing.
Yeah. Now I want to go back. You said you were there for homecoming, but you missed the parade. You said there was an incident at the parade.
Yeah, Emiel party. I found this out later. Apparently, during the parade, Tim Wolf was in he was in the parade. He was in a convertible, and it looks like members of Concerned Student 1950, and somebody just correct me if I've got that wrong, but they surrounded his car that he was riding in, and they demanded to talk to him, and he didn't stop for him. I mean, he actually had him pushed out of the way so they could keep going. You know, in this kind of environment, I think Tim would probably even say maybe I should have engaged them, you know, or told them that I would let's meet, you know, in an hour over here and let's talk about it. So I mean, it's all water under the bridge now. I mean, it happened. That obviously angered that segment of Concerned Student 1950, and like I said, once that thing got going. You know, when the football team says he's not going to play unless the president resigns.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
The president's going to resign, you know.
Now, you're from Columbia, and you went to school at MU. When you were there, did you notice any racial tension between students while you were attending MU?
I was not, but I got enlightened about a lot of things because, and this is 30 years ago, when I was going through journalism school, one of my advisors and a woman that I listened to the most, her name is Gail Baker Woods, and she was a black woman who I had classes with because she was getting her PhD. So she took broadcast classes with me, and she and I, we just were on the same page, okay? And she also eventually worked at the university. She was in charge of recruiting minority professors. And she had told me that it was getting difficult. This is 30 years ago, Emiel, 30 years. She was telling me then that it was getting difficult to find people of color who wanted to teach at the University of Missouri. And I was kind of like, well, why is that? I mean, it's a good school.
Right.
And she just kind of looked at me and kind of wink, and I'm like, wow. So I don't know. I never saw racism, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen. That's what I think white folks have a hard time understanding. Just because you didn't see it doesn't mean it didn't happen. And I think that's a lot of what this thing's about in Columbia that's been happening, in recent months.
Now, the football team not playing. I was listening to some sports radio shows, and actually Gary Pinkel was criticized for standing behind his players. A lot of people felt like, these players are on scholarship. It doesn't matter what's going on. They need to get out there and play. What are your feelings about that?
Yeah, they couldn't see the forest through the trees. To me, it's not that hard. If Gary Pinkel does not support his players, how hard do you think it's going to be for him to talk a kid from St. Louis or Kansas City into coming into Columbia to play football for him? I mean, I'm just being real, Emiel.
Yeah.
You 70-something players or 60-something players on his team are African American. It is what it is. I mean, he had to stand up for his players. I mean, I don't see any other way he could have handled it, because if you're going to rip their scholarship for standing up for what they believe in, I don't know. That's a slippery slope. Now,
there are some people who believe that he resigned at this time because of pressure from what he was doing with the players, because he backed the players. And I've even read reports that they're saying that the disease or the illness that he has isn't that serious. He was more pressured to resign because of what he did with the football team.
Well, I don't know about that, but I can tell you my dad died of that cancer, that very cancer, 5 years ago. Okay? Mm-hmm. Lymphoma is something that you do not play with. You do have to manipulate the treatments. My dad lasted 7 years after the initial diagnosis in 2003. So if Gary Pinkel has lymphoma, you say a prayer for him, and I don't think people should make a big deal out of that. I think that he had planned on stepping down at the end of this season. So that dog don't hunt with me for obvious reasons.
Yeah. Now, there are some people that are discouraged by, I guess, the football players doing that because they're saying, well, what if other colleges, other players do this? I mean, it's a bad example for other college players. I mean, he received a lot of criticism for standing up with his players. I mean, how do you feel about that? I mean, football players at every college deciding they don't want to play because they don't agree with something on campus.
Well, you know what? You know how much those guys are getting paid now. Those head coaches in Division I. That's why they pay them the big bucks. They're going to have to deal with it. I mean, yes, it is a possibility, but I mean, it's Missouri. Columbia, Missouri was a melting pot for some really interesting developments, and yeah, it's going to have reverberations all over the country at institutions, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. You just have to rely on your administration and your head coach to be in tune with the players that they have. And I mean, I think a lot of good can come out of this, I mean, I really do. I mean, and I just didn't know that the anger in Columbia had gotten that bad.
Right.
Hey man, I was educated. It was a teach, I was educated about what was going on. So, I feel bad for Tim Wolf. I mean, apparently the guy, he doesn't get any severance whatsoever. His job just ended. $500,000 a year job. He's done. But I think a guy like that with his kind of character, which I think he does have, I think he's going to be just fine. He'll be just fine.
Now, there are. You're from Columbia, like we said before. There are students who are saying that residents in Columbia have been harassing them. They're scared to leave their dorms, scared to go to class. Some students have even left the campus. What is your experience in Columbia as far as segregation, or I guess how the different races get along?
Emiel, that's where I may be out of touch because I haven't lived in Columbia for, I mean, I grew up there. My first 23 years, I lived there, but I've been gone basically for the last 27 years. And if that kind of crap is going on in Columbia and people are being talked to like that because of the color of their skin, that really angers me because like I said, my experience in Columbia was the exact opposite. White people say sometimes some of my best friends were black friends. Okay. When I was in elementary school, I mean, my best friend in elementary school his name is Chuck Horn, and he's a black kid, and he lived in Kansas City for a while, and I lives out in California. I mean, I always, but if things have changed, maybe they have in Columbia. I don't know, but if they've changed and there's racism going on there, there needs to be another discussion, because that shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening anywhere.
Now, if you're just joining, I'm talking with Steve Shaw, Oklahoma reporter, former Fox 4 reporter, and was born in Columbia, Missouri. If you want to join the discussion, 816-576-7400. We're talking about the recent events down at MU with the college football players and the group 1950. Now, Steve, I know you're a MU fan, an MU alum, but now I don't know if you've heard, there are recent reports that there are some problems down at the KU campus that I guess are similar. When you were at MU, I guess one of the complaints by this group 1950 is the administration, the staffing. There aren't enough African American professors or in the administration. What is your experience like with that, or what was it like?
Well, yeah, like I said before, I got to be pretty good friends with Gail Baker Woods, and she was in charge of recruiting minority professors, 25, 30 years ago on the Mizzou campus. And she told me that, it was challenging sometimes to get minorities interested in coming to Columbia. Now, what was that? Because I don't know why that was. Were they concerned about racism? I don't know. But I remember her telling me that. And again, this is 30 years ago, that they were having a hard time getting minority folks interested. And honestly, because I'm a Mizzou guy and I grew up in Columbia, we're always told to hate KU and Lawrence. Man, you know what? Lawrence and Columbia are just the same. They're the same town. I mean, and I may catch a hard time for this. I just think Lawrence is probably a little prettier, So I don't know anything that's going on in Lawrence. I know Lawrence has a reputation for being liberal, but I thought so did Columbia, Missouri, and Madison, Wisconsin. This thing's kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. This whole deal with the football team and.
Well, how do you think they can move past this? I mean, because now, kind of the nation that has their eyes on Columbia. Basketball season is about to get underway. I mean, this subject probably won't just go away. How do you think MU will respond? I mean, they have a new president now. Do you know the new president? Are you familiar with him?
Yes, I'm a little bit familiar with him, and it sounds to me like they hit a home run. I mean, the guy, he didn't have to do it. I think he's retired. They asked him to come back. He's a retired law school professor. He knows what the deal is. He's going to mend those fences, and I mean, I think it's fixable. And I think Missouri, this university, can come out of this a lot stronger. They're going to have to. Because I tell you what, all the negative stuff back and forth. It's like Tim Wolf said when he resigned. We got to quit yelling at each other and start listening. When he resigned that morning, I was kind of stunned when I was watching it because I was at the gym, and he said we have to quit yelling past each other and start listening. So, I mean, I think that's what started. That's what's going on in Columbia, Missouri now, and I'm proud of it, Well,
how do you think the basketball team will do this season?
Probably not as good as Kansas.
Well, that's usually the case, unfortunately.
Oh, you got me there. No, I think Mizzou, last year, Kim Anderson is very good friends with a good friend of mine, Greg Flaker. He was a captain of one of Norm Stewart's teams back in the early 70s, and I touched base with Greg. He's Dr. Flaker. He's a cardiologist at the University of Missouri Medical Center, and he told me that he thinks we got a real shot at going 500 this year. May surprise a few people. So, hey, let's see what happens. We're 2-0. Mizzou's 2-0.
Yeah. Now, before I let you go, I think our mutual friend Kerry Stapleton said you were in a fraternity with Brad Pitt, or was he at MU at the same time? Or
yeah, Brad was a year ahead of me, and we were both in the Sigma Chi fraternity house there at 500 College, and he was maybe the nicest and classiest fraternity brother I had there. He was always nice to me, and if anybody says anything otherwise, they're off base. He's good people. He was actually born, I think, in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and his family moved to Springfield, and that's where he was raised. So yeah, I got nothing but. I haven't talked to Brad since I saw him at the house 25 years ago. So I don't, I think he's probably pretty well insulated, don't you think, Emiel?
Yeah, I would think it's pretty hard to get in touch with him.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for calling in today, Steve Shaw, news reporter in Oklahoma, and former Fox 4 news reporter. Thanks for calling in, talking about the problems or the Solutions down in Columbia, Missouri.
Okay, thank you, Emiel. Take care.
Okay. Well, I want to keep going on with the show. Like we talked about the issues down at Missouri, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks we can get some of the students on the show, possibly UMKC or KU. And my thoughts on the whole situation with the football team. Let me start with them. The football team deciding not to play was a big statement. And it kind of proved how much power athletes have. I mean, I'm hearing that the Mizzou Tigers were going to lose up to $1 million if they didn't play in the game Saturday, which was at Arrowhead. The school would lose at least $1 million. And with that, they kind of forced the president out. So that speaks volumes to other players, other institutions, and even professional players. If professional players start taking a stand or saying they're not going to play in a certain arena or a certain city because of the racial tension or the way blacks are treated, it would change the world. Athletes and celebrities. And, with the civil rights movement was mainly led by the youth, by teenagers, college students. And that seems to be the case today with the students at MU. They stood up for what they believed in. And I think most importantly, they had a plan. A lot of times we're hearing about people who are upset, the things in Ferguson, in Baltimore. People are protesting for justice, but they're not being specific. But the students down at Missouri, they had specific goals. This is what we want, and this is why we want it. And this is how things are going to be until we get what we want. So, I think the world, adults can learn from what these young people at MU have done, and it's kind of sparked a movement on other college campuses across the country. There was a recent talk, and I think there still is, of boycotting Black Friday. I think the day after Thanksgiving, they call it Black Friday, but not going shopping that day. Last year, there was a report that Black Friday shopping was down, and there was a small movement last year to boycott shopping on that day. And now I think this year the movement has gotten a little bigger, and I think the effect of that will probably be bigger. But it all started. It started out small. It started with specific goals. And that's what we have to realize from any movement going forward. Instead of just getting together and protesting and marching and just talking, a lot of rhetoric, we need to have an idea, a plan of exactly what we want. And maybe we have to challenge some of these athletes to do the same. A lot of people criticize LeBron James for some of the things he's done, but he's been more community oriented than a lot of superstars have been. He's done a lot of charitable works, especially in the African American community, and Derrick Rose as well. But if we had more athletes, I think things would change. We have a large purchasing power. And I think with that purchasing power, we can make things happen. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The Montgomery bus boycott in 1955, the bus company didn't give in because they thought they were morally wrong to treat African Americans like that. They gave in because they were losing money. They were going out of business. And it wasn't easy. African Americans walked to work for a year, caught rides. They made tremendous sacrifices to make this happen. So, the students at MU have kind of brought that spirit back with the movements, with the purpose. And so I want to keep things going. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we can continue the discussion with some of these students and hopefully come up with some solutions. I want to thank you all once again for listening to The Real Deal with Emiel. You can join me next week, same time, same station. I want to thank my sponsors once again, MHG. MHG can take care of all your insurance needs, Medicare, Obamacare. They're located down on 18th and Vine. They have an open enrollment center, and you can call them 816-399-4040 to talk to an expert. That's all for today. I'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening.
Nothing like the ruling time to build our team so we can tell Dr. King we fulfilled your dreams. The origins of man can be traced back to Africa. The facts are indisputable. I'm black and spectacular. The facts are indisputable. Indisputable. Black is beautiful. Black is beautiful.
The Real Deal with Emiel, brought to you by MHG, your local year-round trusted insurance partner. Let MHG help you for free.